Sweatpants for you. But in practice, I mean, who are we kidding? Thank you for being here. My name is Chris Rodolico. I am the director of FYA Art Community Studios. This is Nandini Talwar. And welcome to the long-delayed fourth rendition of In Real Life, a Melrose Storytelling Hour. We'll tell you more about that in a minute, but first, the logistics. The emergency exits. Okay, that was good. The facility is right over there, in case anybody needs it. There will be a brief 10-minute intermission. About halfway through, there will be waters in the back, some treats thanks to Cheat Day Baking Company, owned and operated by Jaya Karamchedi, who unfortunately isn't with us today, but I highly encourage you guys to support her entrepreneurship. I'm thinking of the other logistics. Oh, one more important thing. So if you checked in, check in that you're here, at the back table, you have met with our intern, Ansel Penta. Hi, Ansel! Who graduated from MHS, yet is still here helping out because that's their dedication to their internship. Good stuff. We have a little activity in the back. The theme of the evening is Who Do You Think You Are? So we've got some questions back there that we invite the audience to ponder and potentially answer. It can be anonymous. I know a lot of folks have already participated. If you don't mind, if our MCs read your response, please put a little star on your sticky. We'll have an opportunity in the first half and in the second half for some of those to be read out loud. So everybody gets to participate. So IRL, in real life. You want to tell us about that?
I'll tell you about it. So, right.
Okay. So, nice to see so many wonderful, warm, friendly faces and familiar faces. I'm Nandini Talwar, and an almost 30-year resident of Melrose. I'm the mom of an amazing 23-year-old and a well-loved pup bear who everybody knows in town. Both of them were born and raised in Melrose, and I'm one of the founding members of Melrose Organizers for Real Equality, MORE. And so the IRL, a Melrose Story Hour, was the original brainchild of the Social Justice Subcommittee of Melrose Organizers for Real Equality. And we had our first event. We frantically pulled it together at the Victorian Fair. I don't know, we must have done it in just a few weeks. The topic for the prompt for the event was home. What do you consider home? And we had a great group of speakers. And we had it in your original tiny little studio before you moved to the big yellow house. Our second event, the topic was the butterfly effect. Chris was actually one of the storytellers, and she wrote about her dream to have the big yellow house and has made it come true. So dreams can come true through storytelling. Then we had an IRL 2.5. Some of you might have come to the mayoral story hour with the theme Mortified, where we asked mayoral candidates to tell us stories that mortified them. That was super fun. And then 2020, well, you know what happened in 2020. I don't need to tell you. So here we are. It's our fourth IRL event. And it comes at a time when we're all just coming out of isolation, and at a time where we are experiencing increased division. So what better place to connect us, right? Through community building and connection through storytelling. So we invite you to join us in empathic listening to very personal stories from an amazing group of storytellers that we'll tell you all about in a moment. So we want you to focus on things that connect us instead of focusing on things that divide us, and hopefully that will move us towards building community.
Okay, very quickly, before I introduce, actually you're going to introduce our MCs, I think. Okay, so very quickly, I want to thank our sponsors. The Melrose Cultural Council actually pushed out a grant from 2020 to 2021 so that we could make this event happen. And our other funder is the Arts for All program at FYA Art Community Studios. Arts for All is something that we started in this last year, and the funding from Arts for All provides free scholarships and reduced tuition to anybody who wants to access our programs. It also provides adaptive services for anybody who needs at our programs. It also provides any kind of collaboration that we do with community to bring arts to the community for free, like this event right here. It is funded mostly by individual small donations from people like you. So if you are willing and able at any time in the evening or later, we do have a donation jar. We also have a QR code. You can go to our website, FYAmelrose.org. There's a button that says support our mission. And if you're able to do that, that would be great. We can have more events like this. So, we're ready to go.
So, without further ado, we are so honored. Oops, here we go again.
Getting the prompt. Move over, Mom. So we have 9 incredibly dynamic storytellers who have bravely been working on their stories. They've been working with 2 amazing coaches, Rilda Cassell and Christopher Robinson, who've been coaching them with love. So you are not going to want to miss not a one of these stories. So please stay through the whole event. And we are honored and so immensely grateful to have as our MCs for this evening, Jaron and Concetta Green. So are you all ready? You're really ready? Okay, let's make some noise and show some love and appreciation for our storytellers and our MCs. Enjoy.
Good afternoon, Melrose. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes? If you can hear me in the back, wave your hand, thumbs up. Hey, hey, hey. Y'all all right over here? Marvelous. Well, my name is Concetta Green, and this is my husband, Jaron. Come on, step up. Look, because they can't see you here. All right, and I'm going to step right here so they can see me, and then everybody else. Okay, great. Fabulous. So we're level set. So we are the Greens. We're residents here in Melrose. We also pastor a church in Cambridge called Union Baptist Church. So if you sense a little church swag, a little church flavor, that's what we bring to this today, okay? This is so exciting. We were so honored to be asked to co-host today's event because after so many months of isolation, sometimes the internet can make you feel so separated and so different. It's great to come together and just feel one another's hearts. So, understanding that you all are probably very respectful listeners, I'm going to encourage you to listen closely today, and don't be afraid to listen with your face. What does that mean? Listen with your face. If you hear something that hits your heart, show it in your face. Let your face know about it, okay? If you hear something that you agree with, it's okay to nod your head, because you know what that does? That sends love and it sends courage to the people who are standing up here whose knees might be shaking and you can't see it, okay? Let's practice real quick. Did you hear what I just said? Oh, yes! All right, we're gonna warm you up with one little thing, all right? I'm gonna test your little beat here. That with me. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Well, this little light of mine, yeah, I'm gonna let it shine. Sing. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Woo, that feels good. Sing that again. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. I'm gonna let it shine. Whoa, this little light of mine, I'm gonna let it You sound good now. I'm gonna let it. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Come on, put those hands together. Woo! And the first person to let their light shine today is who?
Well, the first person is going to be this wonderful person named Gail Hamm. Gail has lived in Melrose for 27 years with her partner and kitty. Her daydream is to be a carpenter since she loves her tools. Reality is much different. Her day job is in electronics distribution. She has a thing for rocks and stones that she turns into jewelry. So let's send some of that positive energy to Gail as she comes.
All right, so Chris, she got out of her sweatpants and I ironed today, so. Okay, great. So I began my career in electronics distribution over 40 years ago, and I'm going to take you back to that time in 1979. I was looking through the newspaper. I needed a job, and all the ads said male or female. And there was one particular ad that said female or male, and that just jumped out at me. So I went for the job. It was a job in the warehouse. I was replacing someone named Gigi, and she was there for like 15 years, and I was the only one in the warehouse. So if I wasn't there, the boss took over, the manager. He did the job if I wasn't there. So I liked that job. I did it for about a year. And then a job came up in sales. Now, I really wanted to go into sales. So I had to go see the manager. Now, let me tell you a little something about this guy, Ralph. So he didn't like us socializing. So if we were, we would get a snap of the finger or a and if he wanted us, he would give a head tilt, wanted to call us into the office. Okay. Ralph, I'd like to apply for the sales position. So, no. You're going to need to go into customer service first. Oh, man. Customer service, really? So, I go out and I see my friend Barb, who works in customer service. Okay? And I say to Barb, I'm like, Barb, tell her the conversation. And I'm like, so when are you leaving? Because I got to get your job before I can get the other job. So we laugh about it. I go back to work, and I'm disappointed, but I go home and whatever, right? So come back in the next day. Ralph, the newspaper ad says no experience necessary. And I have more experience than no experience, and I start telling him all the things that I know about the company and how much I want the sales job, and I really want an opportunity to go into sales. I need to get out of the warehouse. I don't want to be Gigi. So he looks at me and says, no, you're too valuable in the warehouse. So I'm thinking, I leave. I'm thinking, I got to go somewhere. What am I going to do? So I go back out and I see Barb and I tell Barb the story. And I'm like, can you believe this? This is so unfair. I can't believe I get a shot. I want to go into sales. He's holding me back. This is so unfair. I think I should call the president. Barb said, yeah, you should. You should call the president. I'm like, really? Yes, call. Okay. Well, Barb, she knows everything. So she knows that Bill is in the Florida office, and she gives me the contact information. And the next morning, I dial up Bill. 7 o'clock, I'm nervous. Not really sure what I'm going to say, but I dial him up. I tell him what happened. We hang up. I go to work. I go see Barb. Barb, I did it. I called Bill. She goes, oh my gosh, you called Bill? Yes, I did. You said I should call him. She says, I didn't think he would really do it. So, well, I did. So that was it. I go about my day. I get the Yes, Ralph. Kathy will start training you tomorrow. So, training me for what? Just, you know what. So I turn around, I got a little bounce in my step, I go back to my job in the warehouse. Now I'm putting parts away. I'm in one of those bays, in the bar overhead. Bar. He leans in. He says, "Don't you ever go over my head again." I said, "Ralph, I will if I have to." Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you, Gail. That's how you kick it off. You know, I'm so blessed to be able to, oh, hey, folks on the camera. I'm blessed to be able to stand in the shadow of this fireball powerhouse next to me, Concetta. So I don't know if I can follow up your wonderful song or that beautiful story. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep the show rolling. Can we do that? So the next person then I want to present to all of you is Sabrina. So a little bit about Sabrina. Sabrina is a current high school student who loves all forms of art. She is a social butterfly who enjoys baking, photography, travel, and apparently poetry too. So let's send some energy and positivity to this wonderful young lady, Sabrina.
And because I know Sabrina's a little bit nervous, on the count of 3, can you help me say, "You got this, Sabrina"? 1, 2, 3. You got this, Sabrina.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sabrina. Okay. Sorry, this is really new to me. Okay. Hi everyone, I'm Sabrina. Today I wrote a poem, or I tried to. I was gonna do a title because that's how poems work. Didn't really work out, so here's my poem without a title. Okay. The only child in a conservative Chinese household, always in a pink princess dress, but without the throne, that she could not afford and was not born with, since she called her family restaurant home. She began to work at the little sushi corner, learned how to balance plates before balancing equations, spent every holiday and birthday serving customers, to the point where her time at school was a vacation. So many people asking what she wanted to be. How about a doctor, an engineer, perhaps a vet? Went to dim sum with auntie she didn't know the name of, turning into a mosaic of everyone she's ever met. Such as a miniature version of her mother, otherwise known as the version her mother forced upon, needed to be talented enough under her standards, learn the piano, knit a scarf, draw me a swan. Tried to form deep connections with the kids her age, but we hadn't even learned long division. They tugged on her trust like silly bands and hammered her heart with verbal incisions. How horrible were the insults thrown at her, manipulating the word help in its real definition. Thought it was normal for her friends to prevent her from eating, saying the only running she did was around the kitchen. Bullied horrendously for reasons she'll never know, where nobody introduced to her the concept of consent. Suck it up, they said. Other people have it worse. Human decency was as foreign as her parents. For she was shown love in all the wrong ways, doubling as a family waiter and therapist at age 10. Nothing left for Cinderella but to clean up after others, having grown up a princess but treated as a burden. Eventually moving schools in hopes for recovery, chance to start fresh and leave everything behind, create a new story where no one knew the prologue, and bury her past identity in the depths of her mind. But it was not happily ever after yet, as more villains came in disguise, already having a personal Mother Gothel who didn't know how to empathize. never realizing how out of place she was. How was being Asian so silent yet so loud? Room full of white classmates, her being a minority, wanted to fit in with them but didn't know how. Cursed her looks in the bathroom mirror, compared her color and her number on a scale. Which racial standard is she supposed to reach? Is her skin supposed to be suntanned or pale? Didn't spare the time to think about herself. Not figuring out a label put her at ease. A codependent empath who adapts to those around, only knowing herself as an array of personalities. Based her self-worth on academic achievement, overworking herself every single day. Stress to her was a comfort emotion. At least she was miserable with a perfect GPA. Out of all the standards and responsibilities she had, disappointment and failure were her greatest fears. Sacrificed her health, hope, effort, and time, but with every painful moment she gained souvenirs. So, who is this girl? By now, I hope you know it's me. Hi, my name is Sabrina, but what is my identity? She, her female, Sagittarius, an Asian American, high school student, or do you want my sexual orientation? My parents assigned me this name as a present for being born, but there is no significance in this arrangement of the alphabet. My genetics and DNA cannot be altered, and to that identity I have no choice but to accept. While that remains permanent, others must be temporary. How about the factors that have a due date? Once upon a time, that version was all I was, but now it's irrelevant to carry that dead weight. My appearances, hobbies, form of self-expression, how would you describe me, your first impression? Don't ask me where I'm really from. Microaggression. Are you looking for creativity or the standard description? When does it cross a line to be a confession? Because what if my identity is a secret possession, especially if I never agree to give you an explanation, and then it all leaves me with the same question. So who am I? Who do I think I am? Definitely not a poet. I'm done with the rhyming. I am only 16. I have a whole life ahead of me. I think things are bound to change. Nothing lasts forever. Check back in a year, and maybe I'll have a different answer. So come back then while you ponder this. Who are you? And to ask this of us, I do not owe you a response, a title, or a label. Maybe I don't know right now, or I never will. Or even if I do, I can choose not to tell you. I have so many more opportunities that I have yet to explore. I will never grasp one defined identity, and I am happy with that, for now. Thank you.
Whatever your identity is, to hold that thing down because it has value, whatever it is. Amen? Amen. Oh, okay. I just wanted to make sure you could hear me. Did you have something to share? A little station identification?
Absolutely. Absolutely, I do. So, for all of our storytellers, if you hear a loud plane, some sirens, a loud dog, one of our little furry friends, it's okay to pause. Let it pass, because we want to hear every single word that you have to share today. Yes. We will wait while the sirens go by. We'll wait. And then if you even wanted to start over, we'll do that too, okay? We want you to have good momentum. We're here to support you through it. Yes. Excellent job, Sabrina. Excellent job. Thank you so much. Also, one more little housekeeping item. If you want to follow your art Melrose, there's a hashtag that you can use even today during this event. Hashtag FYA Melrose. Easy, right? We're all good at this internet thing right now. Hashtag FYA Melrose.
Hold on. And before we go to the next speaker, I just wanted to acknowledge quickly Gail's story, how important it is to go forward anyway. Go forward anyway. It doesn't matter what the construct is surrounding you, what pressure, what invisible pressure is around you. If you want something, go for it anyway. And if the wrong people get upset, you're going in the right direction. All right, let's get on to our next storyteller. All right. Erin Heyneman is a disabled educator and grassroots activist who has called Melrose home for 6 years. That's right. You can make your way on up here. Sashay, sister. She lives with her husband, Peter, and their 2 wonderful, curious kids. Erin is passionate about access, universal design, and aha moments. She is a member and new secretary of the Melrose Commission on Disabilities. How fantastic is that? You can follow Erin's journey on Twitter or TikTok, hey TikTok, at Moms4Marky, or on Instagram at MSWithUs_. And without further ado, put those hands together for Erin right now.
How's this? Yep. Okay. Hi, I'm Erin. Thank you. I love the internet. I really do. Like, even after this year, even after everything that's happened, you have to, like, hear me out, okay? Like, I would consider myself extremely online, and I love the chaos, I love the connections, I love what can be done with the internet and where we can get. And for me, like, I was diagnosed with MS when I was 17 years old in high school, and there's been nothing really more important to that diagnosis than the various support groups that I've been in throughout the years, and they were always online. I've never been in an in-person support group for MS, but I've had it for like 19 years, so it's really important to me. And most of the time that I, was in these groups, I was actually giving the advice, because for a long time, my MS was just on the back burner. It was like, oh yeah, like I have that, but it's something that isn't really, it wasn't front of mind for me ever. So I was giving advice more than I was getting it. I also have done a lot of other things online that I, have helped me, like when I was pregnant with my second child. And the one thing about MS that I did have throughout the years was severe fatigue and exhaustion. And so, like, I was 9 months pregnant with my son, and I got to the point where I really wanted to do, like, the nesting thing. I, like, wanted to clean and do all that stuff and get ready for the baby, and I was just, like, I couldn't. I was, like, so exhausted. I couldn't barely get out of bed after, giving my daughter dinner. And so I went online, went onto YouTube, and found out these vloggers who were cleaning their houses. And I watched cleaning vloggers, and and it gave me like the nesting feeling, which was awesome. I didn't have to do anything, which is also awesome. But it really did help me, because after I did give birth and I did have more energy, like I was able to take what they taught me into my life. But I leaned really heavily on the support groups that I had online when I had a catastrophic relapse last summer. What happened was I lost function on the entire left side of my body. I was paralyzed from shoulder to toes. And it was shocking to me after having MS for so long, right? Like, I didn't think that could happen, let alone would. But it was 2020, so it did. To make it even just a tiny bit worse, I'm also left-handed. Oh, yeah. But I wasn't alone, because I had my support groups, and they were extremely helpful. They taught me so much about MS and like neuroplasticity and all this stuff, and I'll get to that later. But so I wasn't alone, but I was actually pretty isolated. So because it was the height of COVID in June of 2020, I was in the hospital for 4 weeks, and I could only have one visitor per day, and it couldn't be a child. So my husband would bring me laundry, and that was about it. That's when I learned to use Instagram filters really well, because I couldn't communicate with my kids. You're going to know this term. I couldn't communicate with my kids synchronously. Because when I did, I was so devastated by what had happened and not being able to see them that I would cry. And that was like, it was scary for them, and I didn't want to put them through that. And so like, what we ended up doing was like, I would send them a video when I was like feeling good, but I would always be crying right before that, thinking about sending them a video. It was just like a hard time. So I used these filters on Instagram that like would give me like the little like rosy cheeks and like sparkly eyelashes, and my kids loved the videos. And looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm not well in those pictures, in those videos. But so yeah, I was isolated, and I wasn't really alone, but I did have a lot of time on my hands. I was doing 3 hours a day of physical and occupational therapy. And I used the time that I had, so I was able to hold the phone. The reason actually that I was able to hold the phone, I don't have it with me right now, is, oh, you've got it, is my pop socket. Because I could hold the phone in my right hand very easily and do all this stuff. That's access. So I focused on my love of politics. The U.S. Senate primary election was coming up on September 1st, and I was really concerned about that. And I was really concerned about that because I understood what happened to me, and the aftermath of what had happened to me was inherently political. I received the care that I did because I'm white, I'm a white cishet woman with extremely good insurance because of my job as a teacher. Nobody questioned my symptoms at all. Everyone took me seriously. And I was determined to make it that the most progressive person would make it into the U.S. Senate. So I remembered after a while that I had actually started a Twitter account called Moms for Markey a couple weeks before this all happened to me. And it was when these like little accounts were popping up, just kind of like, we were stands for Ed Markey. It was just like, they were kind of funny accounts, and I didn't know what it was going to turn into. Nobody did. But I started posting under that account then. And I quickly realized when other people started following me and I was following them, it became a little community. And I realized very quickly that everybody else in this community was half my age. They were like kids. They were like 15, 16, 17. Many of them were in college, but most of them, or not most of them, but many of them were in high school. And all of a sudden, I had a role, and I had something to do, because I was Moms for Markey, and they were the kids, so I was the mom, and I kind of took on that role of like, settling conflicts within the DM chat and things like that. But that wasn't all me. That was the campaign. That was them, and the generation that I've been teaching for many years. Gen Z, I'm like a huge fan of them just as an entire people. And they had a motto. And the motto for the Markey campaign, or the unofficial Markey campaign, was don't agonize, organize. And yeah, it's a good motto. And I'm not just talking about like a motto, they lived it. So for example, and this is all happening online, it's all happening like from what I can do with my right thumb. But they lived it, they really did. I would have, like, somebody would be in the group chat and say something kind of like, make fun of Joe Kennedy make fun of Joe Kennedy, full stop. And somebody else would come in and say, hey, don't agonize, that's agonizing, don't do that. And we left all of the agonizing, all of the negativity until after the voters decided. And we made our campaign incredibly positive in that way. And it was so important to me. And it was so important to me that they had sort of like come up with that, and I was more than happy to roll with it. And so I did what I could. I wasn't making phone calls, I wasn't canvassing, but I, could get up every day and, give it a little hello and say, hey, it's a great day to vote for Ed Markey. Let's get out there. And I was doing what I could with what I had. And they welcomed me in a way that I was not expecting. I mean, they were like cheering me on. I would say, I just walked 50 feet. And I would get a ton of, people put like W's in like, in the chat, like when I did that. Few people understand that. And it was just really, really nice to be a part of something when I was so isolated and I couldn't even see my own kids. It was amazing. But that mantra actually became very important to me personally. Don't agonize, organize. So to finish up, I need to explain a little bit about how neuroplasticity works. I swear it won't take that long. Okay, so when you have MS, it's like the myelin sheath around the axons and dendrites and stuff breaks down. And it's because your immune system is attacking it. And then what also happens is that it builds back up after your relapse. But what happened to me was it was so inflamed that the part of the brain tissue had actually liquefied. It was gone, and much more like what would happen with a stroke victim. And so when I was doing all of my physical therapy, I was thinking, yeah, don't agonize, organize, don't agonize, right? And that motto. So I'm going to show you how it works. Like, what I would have to do, my arm was totally flaccid, nothing was happening. So I would lift my OT would lift my arm up, and she would say, "Do you want to brush your hair with this hand?" I would say yes, and she would lift it up and just make the motion of brushing my hair. And in doing that over and over and over, and I mean, my recovery took a year, and it's going to be 1 year on Friday that this happened. But in that way, my brain was able to literally organize a path around the hole and create function again. I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know brains could do that. Very exciting. It was so exciting. But I don't want this story to be inspirational, because in the disability community, we find it uncomfortable to be inspirations, because we're just facing the real circumstances of our lives, and we have no other choice but to go forward. But I want this to be a story about access. And when you have the means to communicate, and a group who's willing to embrace you, no matter what or how you're doing the communicating, and see value in your contributions, no matter how small they are, that's how you can strengthen a community. And that's why I love the internet.
People like Erin are why we love Melrose. Don't agonize, organize. Oh my goodness. Would you do me a favor really quick? Close your eyes for a quick second. Take a deep breath in and let that thing out. You can open your eyes. If you have breath in your body, you have power. You have life inside of you. I don't care how small circumstances might make you feel. You're going to steer wherever you stare. And Erin, thank you for reminding us the power of our focus. If we put our focus on something, great things can happen. Am I right? Yeah. Put those hands together.
So there's a question that's lingering. Who do you think you are? My mom used to ask me that question when I was being a little naughty. Who do you think you are? And in my mind, I had a response. Trust me, I did. But I dare not open my mouth to say what it was. There was one time when I said out loud in my outside voice, "Oh, she makes me sick." And instead of getting angry, my mother flipped the script on me. She said, "I'm so sorry that you feel that way." And I felt so guilty. And then I asked myself the question, who do you think you are? Well, we've asked that question from some of you all in the audience today, and here's a few responses. Who do you think you are? I'm a high school student, and I hope to be a graduate that other students can look up to. Who do you think you are? I'm an educator, and I hope to enhance my creativity. Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are? I am becoming. I'm not done yet. Yeah.
Who wants to take credit for that one? Oh, you're shy out here. I'll take credit for it. Oh, it's you, sister? Okay, we'll give it to you.
I think that was actually Michelle Obama, but So I want to call up at this time Sally Bowman Gordon. Sally. Sally is married, has one grown son. She grew up in Minnesota, which is why she claims to speak with no accent. When she's not teaching at Follow Your Art or at the Temple in Peabody, she's trying to create visual presentations of nature or biblical passages. So without further ado, as my wife says, Sally.
Hi, everybody. Hi. My name is Sally Bowman Gordon, and I have a disability, although you cannot see it unless my body is having a reaction. There are many people that have what are called hidden disabilities, like Crohn's disease, fibromyalgia, epilepsy, and there are many more. But these diseases still affect us in our day-to-day life and in the ever-changing world. I am a diabetic. I was diagnosed in 1969. My parents took the news in stride, and so did I, because we knew what it meant for the treatment and the responsibilities, as my older brother Steve is a diabetic. Our family was about to move from Richmond, Virginia back to Moorhead, Minnesota. And so I was placed on a diet. The biggest change was not going to the candy store and buying candy and eating candy anymore. I still blame the Charms lollipop for my diabetes, but I know that's not true. So after we arrived back in Minnesota, I started on insulin, and I was also fortunate for my family support. We have an older brother. I have another brother, Tom, too. We all knew the routines. And growing up in the 60s and 70s, meal times were on schedules. Can you remember that? Yeah. In my neighborhood, dinner was served between 5 and 6 p.m. every night. So none of my friends would come to our door during that time because they were having dinner with their families too. It's amazing. But having that schedule helped me with my diabetes. And I was fortunate for that. I knew when to take my insulin, when to have food, and I have followed that to this day. I have followed having insulin, being on a schedule, is what makes it easier. If I don't follow that schedule, things go wrong. My behavior changes, and sometimes it can cause accidents. For example, one day, I drove my husband Bill into Boston for work. Traffic, fine. Then dropped him off. Then I needed to do an errand in Wellington Circle. So I drove there, no problem. Went into the store. I could tell at the checkout, I was starting to kind of waver in and out of consciousness. Still standing, still there, but I knew my blood sugar was dropping. Got into my car, I was like, I'm 2 miles from home. I can make it home and fix this. The next thing I knew, I was swerving on the highway, back and forth, switching lanes, people honking at me. Cell phones weren't around that much, so nobody called about the erratic woman driver. I finally came to a stop in Cambridge near Porter Square by crashing into a street sign. A neighbor watched me crash. She came over though. She knocked on the window. She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I'm a diabetic." She's like, "Can you move?" She guided me to her porch, sat me down in a chair. She said, "Can I get you something? Can I get you juice?" I said, "Water." She goes, "Can I put sugar in it?" I said, "Yes." She also called the police. So we sat there on the porch. The police came. The officers saw that I was fine. They said, "Go get something to eat." I said, "I will. We'll take care of the car." Poor Fred died. So that is a dramatic story. Happened a long time ago. And fortunately, technology has helped. I can scan my blood sugar with my phone. I'm now on an insulin pump, so I can adjust my insulin levels and make sure I'm okay. But I always tend to run a little low in my blood sugars, so I always have candy in my car, I have candy in my pocket, I have candy everywhere. So if you need some, let me know. But just like the woman that came to help me, she didn't judge me. She just asked me questions and found out what I needed. And as an educator, I've learned through experience that that's the best approach when somebody is not their normal selves, is to ask questions. And my little education piece, that being a diabetic, sometimes I can act like I'm drunk because my speech will slur, my walk will sway when my blood sugar is low. If I'm high, I could have very similar symptoms, but I'll be more slow. My fruit will smell fruity. I don't know if you want to get that close, but hey. But those are things that can help if you have diabetes, and if you know of somebody that's not quite moving the way that you normally see. Thank you very much for listening.
Sally's story. How many of you learned something just from her story alone? You just learned something new about diabetes. I think that's fantastic. It also reminded me about listening with our eyes again, and listening a little bit more empathetically to our community members. Maybe less assumptions when we see someone having the symptoms that she described, not thinking, oh, they're just drunk, oh, they're just high, oh, of course, that's a DUI. It might not be that, right? So question your assumptions every time. Thank you, Sally. Come on, one more time. Ooh, that was good. Okay, we have one more speaker before our 10-minute intermission. So look at your neighbor real quick and say, neighbor, I'm so glad I came. Look at somebody else and say, hey, other neighbor, I'm so glad you came. All right, now we're going to welcome up Jason Webb. Jason Webb is a true son of Melrose. Oh, I love that. Some of you already know Jason. He's a true son of Melrose and a family man that's been seen on the soccer fields of the high school that he went to, sitting right beside his wife and kids. He's been said to be, quote, well-connected, influential, and thorough. Oh, my. So nice to meet you, Jason. His social and civic engagement in Melrose is testimony of those qualities. Ladies and gentlemen, put those lovely hands together and help us to welcome Jason Webb.
Yeah, that's good. Hello, everybody. So my story is starts about 3 or 4 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, maybe, I'm trying to think, about 4 or 5 years ago, I'd say. And my daughter is a dancer. She dances in a dance studio here in Melrose, Center Stage Dance Studio. Shout out to Center Stage Dance Studio if anybody goes there. And so there's a dance that happens every year, of course, a recital, and there's a daddy's dance that I was aware of, that I was made aware of by my wife. I think probably the first year she was doing it. She said, "You want to do this daddy's dance?" I said, "Yeah, absolutely, of course, I'll do a daddy's dance." And in my mind, I'm thinking this daddy's dance is daughter and daddy dance, right? She's gonna be up on stage, I'll be up on stage with her, and we'll engage, and everybody will be like, "Wow, that's really cute. Daddy and daughter up there dancing." And then come to find out, I realized that she won't be up there on stage with me. It'll be me and a bunch of other dads up there. And it'll be choreographed. And you know, I played sports in my entire life. I was never a dancer. And my friends will tell you that. And so there I was every week, probably like every Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it was, at the church on Green Street in the basement, getting a choreographed dance number by the teacher. And this is like, you know, an hour and a half every week, sometimes even twice a week. During basketball playoffs, I'm missing some Celtics games and all that stuff, right? But I'm prideful. Like I get in front of people, I gotta perform. I want to do well. I'm a Leo. And so the night before the dance, there was a couple of steps that I just didn't have down. And by the way, it was boy bands from the 90s. It was like Backstreet Boys, NSYNC, New Kids on the Block, and something else, right? So it was like 4-minute number, and you know, you had to be in step. And so there was a couple of things I couldn't get down. So I called up a couple of friends the night before, and I said, "Hey," I'm like, "do me a favor." I'm like, "You come down to, come out with me somewhere and watch me dance and cue me and make sure I'm doing the right things." Called up a couple of friends. One of my best friends that I'd known since I was 5, since Jalen's age, said, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." So I went down to the YMCA, but the YMCA was closed. I was going to do it on the basketball court, similar surface. That wasn't going to work. So I'm like, all right, let's do it outside. It was a warm night, summertime. So I'm like, let's just go to the high school. Go to the high school. All the lights are on. I'm like, nah, I don't want to do that. It's just too much, right? I'm like, I don't want people to see me. So we decided to go to a more secluded place, which was right where actually the Follow Your Art event was last weekend, in front of the auditorium, at the high school. And so we went there, and we pulled in. It was around probably 8 o'clock at night, so it was dark. We're in there for maybe a minute or two, and all of a sudden, a police cruiser comes up behind us. So I'm like, oh man. So we're dancing, I'm dancing, I had to stop. And he's like, hey, what are you guys doing? And I was like, well, do you really want to know? He goes, yeah, I want to know. He's like, you guys are, after 8 o'clock, after it's dark, you're trespassing, you're not supposed to be here. I'm like, all right. I'm like, here, let me show you. So he's in his car. I come over, I pull up my phone. I'm like, really want to see it? I'm like, here. I'm here with my friend. I'm like, my daughter has a dance recital tomorrow, and I'm practicing dancing, making sure that I get it right. And he's watching me to make sure that I get it right. So I'm like, you want to see? So I had my video on my phone, and he's like, oh. He's like, okay. He's like, that's cool. He's like, man. He's like, if this is what you're doing here, he's like, that's cool. He was like, it's fine. He's like, you can stay. I'm like, you sure? He's like, yeah. I'm like, we can go someplace else. I'm like, it's all good. I don't want to trespass or cause. He's like, no, it's fine. I'm like, all right. You know what? As a matter of fact, I'm like, there's going to be a lot of pressure on me tomorrow. I'm going to be on stage. It's going to be like several hundred people in the audience. It's going to be a bunch of bright lights. I'm like, why don't you just stay? I'm like, keep your headlights on, right? You stay there. I'm like, Adam will stay there. He'll watch the video, and I'll just start dancing. And you can just watch, right? And I'll sit here with all the pressure on me, make sure I do it right. So I'm back there, I start dancing, I'm doing my thing. Adam's cute. I'm like, all right, Adam, go ahead, go. So he plays the music, and all I can hear is the music. When you're rehearsing, you can see the video, the teacher cues you and all that stuff. That's why I wanted to do this, right? Because when I'm on stage, that's not gonna happen. So I'm doing it. I'm like, Adam, no. I'm like, start over again. Shoot, I messed up. doing it a little bit more. I'm almost through. I'm like, oh man, I'm looking at the officer. I'm going, officer. I'm like, sorry. I can't see him, by the way, because it's dark. He's got his headlights on me, so I don't know how he's reacting. But I'm like, officer, I'm sorry. I'm like, just give me a couple more minutes. I think I got this. I think I got this, like that. So I do it again, a couple more times. I'm like, oh, finally. I'm like, got it. I'm like, all right, it's a wrap. We're good, like that. So I go over to the officer, and he gets out of his car. We just start talking. He's like, man. He was like, I've been a police officer for I forget how many years. He was like, I've never seen anything like this before. He's like, I've never experienced this before. He's like, wow. He's like, man. He's like, you're pretty cool. He's like, if you're doing this for your daughter, he's like, you must be a really good daddy. I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'll do anything for her. I'm like, it just does anything for my kids. It just doesn't matter, So we were sitting there, we were talking for like 45 minutes or so, like just chilling, like just talking about all his experiences. He's telling me some wild stuff that happened. I'm telling him some stuff that happened. And so then, probably about a year later, I'm coming down on Franklin Street. And this was probably about, I don't know, was it 2018 or so, something like that, where this is like just after the police officers in Dallas got ambushed, right? And it was like just high tension, right? Just high tension. I remember joking with my father, like before that. I'm like, I'm putting my registration on my window. Like I'm just taping it to my window or something. Like I don't want to upset anybody, right? Driving down the street, going a little too fast, coming down Franklin Street, heading towards like the Highlands, and I'm like, oh man, he's pulling me over. Cop on his bike. So I'm like, all right. So he comes to the window. And I roll down the window. I'm like, officer, I'm like, all right, hold up. I'm gonna just reach over here to get my, to unbuckle my seatbelt. He's like, yeah, it's cool. He's like, and then I'm gonna reach over in my glove compartment box to get my registration. He's like, nah. He's like, it's cool. He's like, you don't recognize me, do you? I'm like, no. He's like, it's Officer Al Brown. And I'm like, oh. I'm like, Officer Brown? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, oh, what's up? What's going on? He's like, man. He's like, you're good, man. He's like, you get a lifetime pass with me, man. He's like, anytime. He's like, I'll never forget that moment a year ago. I'm like, wow. So then I've seen him frequently. I saw him once at the same speed trap, but he didn't see me. And I drove, but I saw him before he saw me, so I slowed down. Like, there's no way I'm not putting like him in that position again. So I came down, and I came around the corner, and I parked my car, and I walked over to him. I'm like, hey man, what's up? He's like, hey, what's up? What's going on? And I'm like, nothing. We're just sitting there talking. He's like, here, let me show you how this thing works. He was like just showing me his speed trap. He was like, hey, he's like, yeah, I'm sitting there talking to you right now. I'm not even. He's like, I'm not looking, but they don't. He's like, so they think that I can't see if they're speeding or not. But he's like, really, it's not like I'm not looking at a number. He's like, he's like, hear this beeping right now? He's like, yeah. He's like, the faster it beeps, then I know they're speeding like that. So I'm like, oh, cool. So we're sitting there just talking, and then he's like, all of a sudden, like somebody's going really fast. He's like, all right, I gotta go. I'm like, all right, man, see you later, like that. So every time I see him, I just big him up. I'm like, hey, man, what's going on? So it's just really, really cool. So that's my story.
Was that not hilarious? Put your hands together one more time. Put your hands together. This is like so much better even like than speed dating. Like you get to meet like a bunch of neighbors really fast. Like the world feels a lot smaller. You just want to give everybody a hug. Isn't it fabulous? Come on. Fabulous. We're about to take our 10-minute intermission. And we want to let you know about a couple of things. The first thing I want to let you know is, number one, you can't leave. Number two, you're welcome to go to one of the tables in the back. Wave at the people, Manjula. We have cookies and we have water. The condition on the cookies and water is you got to stay for the next part. No, there's no conditions. Enjoy yourself. Enjoy the refreshments. Another thing, Jaron?
Yes, we would like to thank Jay for all of those speed trap tips. Thank you, Franklin Street. Anyway, enjoy. 10 minutes, we'll be back for more stories. Thank you so much.
All right, if you got your cookie and your water, it's time to come back to your chair. Come on back. If you're at the table, come on back. If you got some water, come on back. Come on back, come on back. If you got your cookie, then come on back, come on back, come on back. If you come on back. Side note, he's the crazy one.
This is what we do at home all the time.
Yeah. We just make up random songs to make our children do what we need them to do. But we give you guys much more credit than that. So thanks for coming back. Put your hands together. We want to celebrate the speakers who have already shared. Thank you for sharing your stories for this Who Do You Think You Are event sponsored by Follow Your Art Melrose. Thank you to everyone who's watching online. Hey, y'all. We have a couple more storytellers. So if you just came in, if you're just joining, or if you're settling in after the second half, we want you to get your hearts and your minds opened up one more time and get ready for our next speaker.
Awesome. So, check. 1, 2. I like that. Got them both going on. Well, at this time, we want to welcome Marie McQuaid. Marie. So a little bit about Marie this evening. Marie has lived in 22 different places on 2 continents and 5 states. Residing in Melrose for 16 years now with her husband and 2 boys, she finally feels like she's home. And I know that feeling. In 2019, Marie joined the Melrose chapter of Speaker Sisterhood, a public speaking club, and credits this amazing group of women for inspiring her to share her stories out loud. Are the sisters here? Woo! Awesome. Well,
Uplift women's voices.
well, let's uplift them. Here's Marie.
Thank you, Audrey. Hi, everyone. My story today takes place in the summer of 1969 when I was a 4-year-old girl living in Fukuoka, Japan. I lived with my mother and my sister Naomi, my uncle Hajime, and my grandmother, Oba-chan, in Oba-chan's very small apartment on the second floor of an old traditional Japanese home. And this story is basically going to be a day in my life as a little 4-year-old girl in Japan. So in the morning, we would start by folding up our bedding, what Americans call a futon, but I call a futon. We'd fold it into thirds and put it away in the closet on a special shelf for the futon. My mother would have to do that part because it was pretty heavy. In my grandmother's apartment, to go to the bathroom, you'd have to go down some stairs. Now, these stairs would not pass any modern building codes whatsoever. They were ridiculously steep, and there was nothing to hold on to. Well, on this particular day, I am not being careful, and I fall down the stairs. And at the bottom, I cry. I'm so exasperated because I have fallen down these stairs many times. But, you know, I'm 4 years old, I'm cartilage, I'm okay. I get up, brush myself off, go down this long corridor to the bathroom. Well, it's not really a bathroom because there's no tub or shower. So maybe it's like a toilet room. But it's not really that either because there's no toilet. Yes, you wonder what it could be. It is a hole in the floor over a pit. And kind of like those steep stairs, this would also not pass any building codes because there was nothing to, keep you safe in this room. It's just a hole in the floor. And every time I would assume the position in this toilet, I would remember the story of my uncle, Hajime, who had fallen down this pit once as a little boy. Yeah, and I was terrified every time I was there, that's not gonna happen to me. Later in the day, after breakfast, my sister and I would play in the back garden, and there would always be a couple of semi-feral cats hanging around. And I'd like to think of them as descendants of my mother's childhood cat, of whom we'd heard many stories. My favorite one being of once when this cat had kittens, the family was given a little tiny stray puppy. And my mother just put the puppy with the kittens, and this cat just adopted the puppy, and just, was his mom for the rest of their lives. For lunch, we would go to my grandmother Obachan's restaurant. That's how she made her living. It was called Yasuka Shokudo, which basically translates to Yasuka restaurant or Yasuka diner. And it was a tiny little storefront in the front of this building that we lived in. And I just remember the aromas. I mean, I love Japanese food still to this day. And if you do too, you can just imagine it smelled like a Japanese restaurant with all that wonderful food. And my Obachan would make me my favorite dish, which is what I called slippery fish. And my mother later told me it was probably black cod. And the regulars would come for Obachan's wonderful food and also for her great conversation. She was a great conversationalist. And she had an assistant who worked there, who had been there for many, many years. And the thing about this woman is that she had a mouthful of gold fillings. It was like every tooth had a gold filling. And so I'm pretty sure that every time I talked to this woman, like, I was not looking in her eyes. All I saw was just like this gold, and was just like, how did that happen? Maybe that's what they did in Japan when you had bad teeth. I'm not sure. Anyway, so after lunch, Obachan would often take us shopping with her. We'd go to the fish market, and my sister and I would go with her. And I remember this one particular day, I'm at the fish market, and I have my face pressed up against the glass. She's behind me, and I turn around to tell Obachan something, and she's not there. It's this other lady, and she's smiling at me, but I'm like, oh my God, I panic, because I think that I've been abandoned in this market. I'm 4 years old. Well, I find Obachan and my sister, and all is well. But I'll never forget that feeling of terror. Often when Obachan took us shopping, she would end the shopping trip by taking us to buy some candy. And my favorite was bontan candy, which is a citrus-flavored candy that had two features that I especially liked. It's wrapped in what looks like very fine plastic, but it's actually rice paper, and you put it in your mouth and it just melts. And I never got tired of that, feeling. You're nodding, maybe you've had this candy. You've had this, okay. You can buy it in Asian markets around here. And the second thing I liked about it is that it would come with a little toy, or like a trinket, almost like a Jack-in-the-Box, right? So as a 4-year-old, my sister and I, we collected these, and they were like treasures that we kept. Later in the day, usually after dinner, we would go to the local bathhouse because my grandmother's apartment did not have a bath or a shower. So we would go to the bathhouse. I don't know how common that is in Japan now, but it would be a public space. You just paid to bathe there. The boys and the men would go on one side, and the women and the girls would go on the other side. And you start by taking all your clothes off in the locker room, and then you have a long washcloth and some soap and a basin. And the first thing you would do is soak in one of the big tubs, kind of like hot tubs. They're like communal tubs, right? Deep ones. And then after you get out, after a few minutes, you get out, and then you go and sit on a wooden stool in front of, hi, Dr. Gordon. My doctor is here, so if I really pass out from nerves, she's going to resuscitate me. I feel supported. So then we'd sit on a wooden stool and in front of a faucet, and that's when we'd do the actual washing, right? We'd scrub ourselves with this really long washcloth, and then rinse ourselves with this basin of water. And then when you're all clean and rinsed off, you then go and sit in one of those tubs again to end the bathing ritual. Now, this one particular day, Obachan took us to a fancy sento that had a whole bunch of tubs, and they were all a different temperature. And I remember she was in the hottest one. And so Naomi and I dipped our toes in that tub, and we're like, oh, we can't be in that tub. We found another tub that was more appropriate for us. So at night, we would kind of reverse what we did first thing in the morning. We would open the closet, take the futon out, fold it out, and set up our bedding. And Naomi and I was 4, Naomi was 5. Like other kids, we didn't want to go to bed. And so Uncle Hajime, who was a great storyteller, would tell us all kinds of stories. And one of our favorites that I remember is about the Sandman, which you guys are probably familiar with. The Sandman's going to come and put sand in the eyes of any child whose eyes are open when they shouldn't be. So Hajime would be at the window, and he would say, "Okay, girls, the Sandman's coming, so you better get ready for bed." And then we would creep to the window because we wanted to see this guy, especially I did. I think Naomi was a little bit more scared. And the closer we got, then Hajime would say, "He's coming! I see him! He's right here!" And we would scream and run into our beds and close our eyes tightly. Well, a few months from this day, our lives changed dramatically when we got on an airplane and moved to Southern California. My father, who was an American, had gone on ahead of us and to find work and a place to live. And so in December of 1969, we moved permanently to America. And within a year, I had forgotten almost all of my Japanese and strongly resisted any attempts by my mother to teach the language to me again. And I became self-conscious and embarrassed about my Japanese heritage. The shape of my eyes, the tint of my skin. When I went to kindergarten, kids teased me for my Asian looks. And so my Japanese identity started to fall away from me. And I'd like to say it was gradual, but it was actually pretty quick. But, these memories I have of being a 4-year-old girl in Japan, in Fukuoka, living with my Obachan, they're, as fragmented and fragile as those memories are so many years later, they are a part of me, reminders that once upon a time, I was a Japanese girl.
Can you hear me on this one? Oh, I know you can hear me on this one. Every part of you is a layer, and it is art, and it's a gorgeous masterpiece. Thank you, Marie, for reminding us of that, right? Every layer of your life matters. You might think, my life is bland. It's full of all these neutrals and all these weird grays. But you know what? There's some splashes of white and dark, and it's majestic to see from the outside. That's why we love moments like this where we can come together and just be reminded of that. Thank you again to Follow Your Art for hosting this. Do you love this? Right? I gotta love this. I gotta like it. If you want to see more programming like this, we're going to encourage you right now to make sure you make your neighbors aware of Follow Your Art and its programming. We also want to encourage you to tell your friends to give their money to Follow Your Art, to reach into your own pocket. Give a little cash. Somebody say give a little cash. Y'all not doing right. Put your hand up like this. Left hand, right hand, I don't care. Get a little cash.
It goes like this.
Actually, give a little cash. Because we want to keep more art like this alive. Okay, so we're going to keep things rolling with our next speaker. You want me to do it? Okay. Here we go. Joy Bolio. Did I say that correctly? Oh, come on, Jesus. Okay. Joy Bolio is a mom, wife, and small business owner who loves post-apocalyptic fiction. First of all, you are my people. Especially with LGBTQ plus characters. Her daily goals are clean floors, folded laundry, and a positive attitude. Oh my gosh, life goals. Joy loves her wife and 2 kids and enjoys family time. And the thing that she missed most during last year's quarantine was her creative work as a hairdresser and board games with friends. Now you just heard she's a hairdresser. Reach out to her after today, okay? Put your hands together for Joy!
So I just bought a house. Because buying a house in a pandemic sounds like a great idea, right? So we bought a house, and it was built in 1898, and it has this beautiful stone porch, and we can have our friends over during COVID, which is great, and the kids can come and play Dungeons and Dragons and be outside. And the front door is original to the house, and it's one of those full panel doors with the just little leaded glass in it. And we love it. We love our door. Before that, for about 9 years, we rented an apartment. And we were up high in a Victorian. We had the second and third floor. We had 2 doors between us and the rest of the world. I loved it. I loved it. I felt so safe. I felt like Rapunzel, only I didn't really want to get down. It was a great place for 9 years. We had a great landlord. My daughter turned 2 there, and then we just moved before her birthday. It was a great neighborhood. I met great friends. This house isn't the first house we bought, though. We bought a house when we first met, about a year later. It was a small house because Carolyn was in college, and it was just 2 small bedrooms. We got married in 2004. We were couple number 86 in Massachusetts. We were in Cambridge when they opened that night so that they could allow us all in so we didn't have to wait. But Carolyn was working. She was working 3 to 11 at the time. So we had some friends that came with us, and we stood on the inside of the SWAT team that was there to keep us all safe. Carolyn was the last person they let through the door. She had to tap a guy and SWAT and say, I have to get in there. And they had to open the door and part with their big shields to let her in so that I could call her my wife. So we bought this little house, and again, she was in nursing school, so it was small. 2008, we had our first kid. The house was too small. So we put on an addition. And in 2008, everybody knows what happened to the housing market, right? So we put on an addition, and we chose this beautiful door with glass all the way down, and we loved it. Let the light in. It was wonderful. Right after we closed on this house, though, way back in the beginning, that was the first time we dropped our stuff off there, and it was wonderful, and we were so excited, and she left her guitar there. She doesn't know how to play guitar. She just thought she looked cool. So she left a few boxes and her guitar. And that was the first time we were broken into that night. Came back the next day, and everything that we had left was gone. So we lived there during all that time, and, had Carson, and it was wonderful. And we had gotten broken into too many times to count. One time it was Christmas, and we were out in the Berkshires with family, and we were bowling. We got a call from the police department. You need to check on your house, or send someone to check on your house. So we packed up and we came home. There was another time we were at a barbecue on a day like this. It was beautiful. And we had gotten so used to this call that it didn't faze us when they called again and said, your home was broken into. And I said, that's all right, I got this. And I put my stuff down. I said, I'll be back in about 45 minutes. And I went home, made sure everything was okay, and went back to the barbecue. We didn't feel safe. It was just where we were. After our daughter was born, they were sharing a room. It was 8.5 by 11. And we had a crib and a toddler bed, and it was 2 bedrooms. So we said, we're gonna have to start thinking about something. And we carried on through that Christmas. And one night in the middle of the night, I heard a loud crash. Somebody threw asphalt through my glass door. So I called the police, because Carolyn was working nights. And they came again. And all of these men filled up my home with their space. And they checked and they said, was your home ransacked? And I said, no, it always looks like this. And then they left. But my door was still broken. And she couldn't come home. And I was home with my kids. So I stayed awake. And in the morning, I called my builder who had put on the addition. And he said, I'll be right there. And he came with a big steel door that had a very small window. And he installed it, and he said, I'm gonna look around and make sure that there's no other damage. And he came back in the house and he said, there's asphalt all over the front yard. And we're gonna have to reset your bay window because they tried to break that too. I don't know if you noticed, but did you notice there was a bullet hole in your bedroom window? And I said, what do you mean? I didn't hear a bullet. And he said, there's a bullet hole in your bedroom window. So I went outside and I looked, and I remembered a few weeks before, because of course I drove a minivan at this time, so I remembered a few weeks before that my van had the back window break. And I had, the cute little stick figures with the two moms and the two little kids. And we didn't know how my window in my van got broken. We figured somebody probably tried to break in. So we're pretty sure it was a bullet. So we moved 6 weeks later to our tower with 2 doors between us and other people. And we stayed up there until this year. In March of this year, as the world was shutting down, or the US was shutting down, I got sick. I had COVID. And Carolyn had COVID. And we stayed in our tower for about 6 weeks with our kids in our 3-bedroom apartment. And we realized it's time to buy a house. We can't do this. So we went through the rest of the year like most of us did. Some were anxious to get out, some were still hiding. And I didn't get better. I didn't get better for a long time. In January, my mother called and said, you guys gotta get out of that house. Now, I hadn't seen her since January of 2020. She lives in Florida. She said, it's time to move, it's time to buy a house. And I said, Mom, we can't do that. She said, I'm gonna write you a check. And my mother wrote me a check for $250,000. My mother wrote me a check for $250,000. She was a single mom. We were real poor for a long time. She didn't have a car until I was about 6. We used to thumb, but she thumbed her way to college. And she got a degree in nursing. She worked her butt off. But that money came from my Uncle Andy. My Uncle Andy had passed away about 5 years before. He was gay. He was gay in the 1930s. He was gay in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. My Uncle Andy saved his money and lived his life. And he left it for us. So we started looking for a house during a pandemic. We found this home with this glass door. And we thought about changing it. We thought about putting a steel door up. And then we sat and we said, no, we're keeping our door. This is our home.
A little bit more of that. This is our home.
This is the community that we create. We decide the love that we share here. We decide to even be a door. Amen? Amen. We want everyone in the community of Melrose to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel accepted. And that happens not just with these, big statements and just the signs and big parades, right? It happens with these one-on-one interactions, right? With conversation, with learning about each other, and just taking a beat and doing better. Put your hands together for joy. All right, Jaron, can you introduce our next storyteller? Let's keep this rolling.
Yes, my pleasure, my pleasure. So I want to introduce to you, can you hold it? I want to introduce to you all Maya. Maya is a recent graduate of Vassar College, where she studied public health and economics. She now works in healthcare consulting and spends time on mutual aid efforts aimed at combating food injustice and police violence. She has a lifelong love of dance. You might need to connect with Jay over there. And has recently taken up embroidery. You can usually find her dissociating or trying to bake the perfect chocolate chip cookie. There's some proud moms over there too. Here we go. Here's Maya.
Hi everybody. So growing up from about ages 2 to 6, like most children I think, my favorite foods were buttered noodles, bread with butter, and pizza. And luckily my palate has expanded since then. It's been about 16 years, but you can still imagine my immense dismay at being diagnosed with celiac disease this past winter. And celiac disease is a wheat intolerance. And lots to tell about that. It's been a rough road, but a positive road. But one thing that I found really interesting about being diagnosed was that celiac has a really strong genetic component. It often runs in families. And my diagnosis came as a complete shock. I didn't know anybody else in my nuclear family that had celiac disease. And then it hit me one day that I actually don't know half of my biological family's genetics. So I have 4 beautiful mothers. They're all in the audience today. And my father was actually a sperm donor. And now that I'm over 18, I have the opportunity to meet him if I want to. But to be honest, growing up, and even in the past 4 or 5 years, it hasn't really crossed my mind. I had 4 moms. They're a little overbearing as it is, and they love me so much. And they care about me a lot, and having 4 beautiful moms in my life was just enough in the parent department. So after being diagnosed, I did start to think about that decision a little bit, since celiac is genetic in a lot of cases. And I think first when I think about meeting my donor father, I have a lot of anxieties that come to mind. I'm a very anxious person as it is, so that makes sense. I often think, like, would I see myself in him, and would he see him in me, and does that matter? I think about whether it would be a letdown to meet him. No idea what he's up to these days. He could also just be dead. Like, I really don't know. And I think probably the biggest one is, like, what if he wants more out of the relationship or less out of the relationship than I do? And I think once I get past all those anxieties, there are some, like, really positive things and questions that I have that I feel like could be answered if I were to reach out and meet him. So could he be a new person that I could bond with in addition to my 4 lovely mothers? Could he provide more information about my ancestry? And perhaps most saliently to celiac disease, could he provide more information about my genetics? And then I was thinking about this question of who do you think you are? And I was thinking about all of the things that I had been thinking about my donor father with this diagnosis. And I thought that perhaps knowing my donor father would also complicate my identity as an Indian American woman. So I grew up in Melrose. I spent my first 18 years here, and during that time I often tried to hide the fact that I was Indian. I tried to assimilate as hard as I could because Melrose is a very white community. So I would spend half an hour every morning straightening my hair. I would get up early just so I could do that, to have matching hair to everybody in class. There was like a 2-year period where I was really ashamed of all of my arm hair. I think as soon as I hit middle school, I begged my mother to take me to the salon to get my eyebrows waxed so I wouldn't have a unibrow. And then I went off to college for 4 years at Vassar, and I had what I like to call my POC awakening. So I came to really embrace my Indian identity, and I really wanted to learn more about the culture. I got to travel to India, which was really cool, and meet a lot of my family there. But at the same time, a lot of the other students that were at Vassar who were Indian, I felt like I wasn't Indian enough to fit in with them because a lot of them were international students from India, and they had grown up with the traditions and the food and the family in a way that I maybe hadn't as much. So I didn't really feel Indian enough to fit in with that community either. So now I'm about a year post-grad, living in Cambridge, and for me I feel like identity is now something that is more personal than categorical, I think. So I identify as an Indian American woman, for example, even though technically, biologically, only half of my identity is Indian. My donor father, I came to find out, is half Italian and half from the United Kingdom, I think. And I see myself often as a product of all 4 of my mothers, even though I'm only genetically related to one of them. So I see myself a lot in my biological mother. I feel like direct descendant of her for sure. But there are all these other things and characteristics and traits that I pick up from my other 3 mothers, even though they're not genetically related. And we often joke about that, like the nurture over nature component of my upbringing, I think. So I'm left to wonder how figuring out who my donor father is would fit into this picture. And I'll kind of leave you with that. I'm leaving you with more questions than answers about my identity, and I realize that, but I think that makes a lot of sense because I think, like most people who have gone before me have said, identity is open to change. It shifts a lot throughout your life. It's about how you see yourself and about how other people see you, and it's always evolving, and I'm still young. So I'll leave it there.
Somebody say, go Maya! All right, I'm going to ask you to turn to your neighbor one more time and say, hey, neighbor. You ain't really turned to your neighbor. Say, hey, neighbor. Who do you think you are? Yeah, turn to the other neighbor and say, who do you think you are? These are the questions we're asking ourselves as we listen to these stories, right? I'm sure as you're hearing stories, you're thinking about your own stories. So we're loving this exchange, and we got one more storyteller for you. Jaron, come and tell them who the next storyteller is, please.
My pleasure, Concetta. So you know this woman. We've been really talking about her all day long. When you say follow your art, you say her name. Chris. So Chris Rodolico spends much of her time creating opportunities for people to express themselves creatively. Recently, her aversion to headshots created a golden opportunity for Kiara.
Over on the board.
Oh, good. When not in the terrain of the big house, the big yellow house that is, she attempts to remain relevant to her teenage children, or runs around for hours in the woods, dreaming up baked good recipes. Here we are, Chris Rodolico.
Can I get a really quick give it up for Concetta and Jaron, please, for carrying this afternoon through? So before we go any further, you should probably know that I'm also attracted to women.
These words I say on a second date with my now husband of 2 decades. They come more easily with strangers. A newly minted young adult living alone in a new place, I self-select for people I think will be okay with hearing what I need to say. Spoiler alert, he was, and 23 years later, in all things, he still is. Now, stories need stakes, and I may have just given away my happily ever after, but there are stakes here. I don't yet know what kind, but I do know they're mine. See, I grew up in a black and white world. Not a black and white town. For the record, if you were black, you lived in the next town over, and that is a separation story, separate and equal to this making of me. But for this story, we're going to let that be. See, this is a Roman Catholic world where gay is acknowledged, as in, if you're gay, you're damned. If you're not gay, you're straight. In between means you're afraid to say you're actually gay. So for good reason, there's no in between. In this world, this attraction to girls is so incomprehensible that I repackage it as admiration, a desire to emulate, a yearning for friendship from that small circle of girls in my Catholic school world that isn't big enough to fit me. I try for tomboy, a girl with athletic ability and a certain level of respect. I play every free sport in my town and excel at exactly none of them. So with no other identity available to me, I am a girl who's bad at being a girl. Now, if being gay is frightening, attraction to boys too, well, that's baffling because both is not a color I can see. It's not my story. If I have to choose one over the other, I'm playing it straight. As an odd kid, I know acceptance is not an option, but let's not choose excommunication. You see, I thought I had a choice, and I thought the choice was obvious. It's in my all-girl female Catholic high school that I find my place, but still no space to safely explore sexuality when even the most caring adults and loving friends faithfully believe that gay actions are sinful, let alone me. Guilty and shameful when attracted to women, relieved when attracted to men, convinced that my friendships will forever alter, if not dissolve, if I come out. I keep silent. The stakes are too high. Now at home, there's nothing to show, nothing to tell. 2 parents with 3 jobs raising 4 kids, each battling their own demons. I am independent. I get good grades. I have friends. I am not in crisis. I am okay. Stepping back now into those 2 tight shoes, I understand that the love my parents have for me meant gay would have been okay. Bisexuality is a blip. It doesn't fit the narrative. It's a pause in the story with a bookmark that says, no worries. At some point you'll pick one, and we'll deal with it then. But I knew, they knew, when I brought that to-be husband home and I saw joy and relief in their eyes that went beyond their artsy daughter finally getting hitched to a level-headed guy. She is not in crisis. She is okay. To keep my queer from becoming a footnote in our story, we join a GSA and a welcoming church. And I come out in both places to kind responses ranging from confused smiles to some version of, and this is your husband, right? So, I circle back in to my closet with its revolving glass door. The door is unlocked to anyone who knocked, but who here asks a hetero married woman about their sexuality? The default is a straight married LGBTQ ally, and because how I identify to my community doesn't matter to my community, it doesn't matter to me. We have a family, And from as soon as our children can hear, we make clear their sexual identity is theirs to claim. See, I picture my children loved as if I can imagine it into existence, but the gender of the people who love them, it's never clear. My kids are queer. Maybe lesbian, maybe bi. They know for sure they are not straight, and they can just be with no need to come out. And this is the start of what unsettles me, as my children say to me that in our house there is no construct of a closet to come out of. And that is a point of parenting pride, and yet I wonder, are they being deprived of something that's important to their identity? Or maybe I'm just speaking for me. See, in this world, I have been a straight, married, white woman of privilege for longer than I have been anything else. Outside of my home, I am not secretive, but I am not declarative, because it doesn't matter, does it? Stories need stakes. What are the stakes for a woman of privilege in a comfortable position coming out as something that doesn't matter? Does it? Does it matter for my children to see their mom get uncomfortable in her community and comfortable in her own skin? Does it matter to my colleagues, to my friends, to you, to me? What do I have to lose? What kind of stakes are these?
I feel like you gotta walk up and give the slow clap on that one, right? Yes! Own your space, own yourself, and smile wide with joy. It is a beautiful thing to come together like this as a community and just be. Isn't it nice to just be? No one's asking you to be anything different other than who you are in this moment. It's awesome. So I'm going to ask you again, who do you think you are? Woo! Hopefully you're someone who's going to share the message of how powerful today's event was. Hopefully you're someone who's going to take a couple of extra cookies as you go. Huh? Because we got a lot in the back. No, we can't take these home. Hopefully, did everyone, well, let me ask this question. Did anyone bring a cell phone? If you did, just kind of hold it up real quick. Hold up your cell phone. I'd like you to take a moment and open up your camera, because this is really powerful. We want to mark this moment. If you have your cell phone, you have your camera, I just want you to get a quick little selfie with your neighbor, yourself and your neighbor. Whoever you're sitting with. I want you to take a selfie with the neighbor on the left, and then I want you to take a selfie with the neighbor on your right. Even if it's, somebody you came with, but hopefully somebody you didn't come with too. That's kind of cool. Say, hey neighbor, take this selfie with me. Show me your teeth or your shiny gums, whatever you got. Make it shine, baby, make it shine. Now that you've taken those pictures, I want you to go on whatever form of social media you have and use the hashtag FYA Melrose. And you can also do another hashtag if you fancy, who do you think you are? Right? So when you post it online, you upload the picture, you put in that little pound symbol, FYA Melrose, all one word, and then you hit share. Because we want more people to know about this event, right? And what happened here. Has it been good to you?
Well, I want to take a quick moment before we disperse to thank the coaches. All of our speakers today had coaches who worked. Mr. Christopher Robinson, come on. This awesome guy. And Rilda Cassell.
Glad y'all came out. Keep keeping it casual. This is not an event. It's a typical thing, right? Yeah. Keep it typical. Go to, frequent your other spaces, and turn to your left, turn to your right. Start some conversation with folk.
I'm just so grateful to storytelling. Storytelling's been a big part of my life professionally and personally for a long time now. And I'm so grateful to Chris and for all your art for making this part of the community. And I'm so grateful for other Chris, my new best friend, because we spent a lot of time together the last 10 days. And this was wonderful, and thank you so much for coming.
I also want to say you all have been the most beautiful, delicious crowd I've seen in a long time. I haven't seen a crowd since COVID started, praise God. But it's nice to see your smiling faces. They're so beautiful. All right, and before we go,
Chris and Nandini, would you come up, please?
Yeah. Can we please thank MMTV, which is recording this whole thing, for all of our friends who have like beach dates and stuff like that they can get to. And to the rest of our committee, where is everybody?
Yes,
Adam and Carol and Maureen and Manjula and Ansel back there. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody. Yes, and the recording will be up on MMTV on their YouTube site. So if your friends missed this and wish they had seen it, send them there. Thank you all for coming. What a great turnout. Thank you, Storytellers.